Hey, everybody. Welcome to finally a new podcast. I know it's been a while, but hey, I've been busy, and I think we'll be able to demonstrate some of the reasons for that during the course of our conversation. This is Crew Call 4-5, November 2023, and I'm here with a pair of Hermans, Alec and Matt Herman, guys I've known for quite a while, friends of the show. I don't think this is their first rodeo on the podcast, but this is their first rodeo with a new venture. So we're going to discuss all of that. Alec, Matt, how you guys doing?
Well, Mike, how are you tonight?
Great. You guys are to one extent or another well known in the hobby, but there's probably plenty of people who will see this who really don't know much about you. So I thought we'd just kind of maybe touch a little bit on the background. Whenever I'm talking with somebody, it's like, how do you get into the hobby? How did you get into being a model railroad professional, if you will? So my understanding is it goes back to it's all your dad's fault. Is that true?
Yeah, pretty much. He's been into all aspects of trains since he was a kid. He was a truck driver for quite a while. He'd be on the road for who knows how long, come home and then drive another 10 hours to go chase the 611 or leave at 2:30 in the morning and, go rail fanning for the day and be home that night. And
so he's the original road warrior.
He definitely is.
Yeah.
Yep. So then I guess it was 85. He worked for Interstate, old trucking company, and they went bankrupt. So it was right around 85 because that's when the 84. Okay. So then North Shore Railroad in Pennsylvania, a small short line, took over it was the old DL&W line out of Northumberland up to Wilkes-Barre. And Conrail was kind of selling off a bunch of lines in those days, and North Shore took that one over. And we chased the first run. Actually, it was maybe the last Conrail one. It was a Conrail business train. And I ended up somehow or other on the train on the way back, and that got him talking to some of the North Shore guys, and next thing you know, he was working for the North Shore.
Just like that. It's a cool little short line. I did some rail fanning on it probably back in the 90s, and again, one of those deals where I just kind of stumbled upon it and said, "Ooh, this is cool."
Yeah. They're big on heritage, so a lot of their paint schemes are you're like Awana based, right, or Reading based. They have some they have a Nittany and Bald Eagle line, which is just a pretty scheme, blue and white. And
is that the same company?
It is. Yep.
Oh, I didn't realize that
at one time. It was Wellsboro and Corning,
Sturbridge.
Sturbridge line.
There's the Shamokin Valley, the old Shamokin branch down to Shamokin, and there's the Union County, which is the old Reading through like Milton area and Lewisburg, and then the Lycoming Valley in the Williamsport area.
Okay. Yep.
And the Juniata Valley in Lewistown, Pennsylvania.
Jeez, I had no idea that they were all one parent company there. That's interesting to me. Maybe if I was paying more attention, I would have seen that in Rail Pace or something. But I'm more interested in the pictures, So what did your dad do for the railroad?
Well, he started off as train crew and then worked his way up. And, by the time he was ready to move on, he was chief mechanical officer. So they were sending him to school out in Chicago every year, go right to LaGrange at EMD. And we'd go out and he'd go to school for the day, and I'd hop on Metro, and every day I'd go out on a different line and rail fan for the day. And he'd get out of school and meet me somewhere. So
now, Alec, were you too young for this?
Yeah, I was too young for that.
Like, how far apart are you guys in age?
A lot. So at our last job, my favorite thing used to be people would ask me if he was my father. And I found it a lot funnier than he did.
Until the point I put him over my knee. Then he didn't think it was funny anymore.
Our dad was up there in age when he had me, so people used to ask him if he was my grandfather, and he used to also not like that as much as I did. So.
Right. It's all a matter of perspective. You'll see at some point.
I've got a younger daughter that, happened to me a little bit later in life, and I always call her the surprise. Alec was oh crap.
So, Alec, do you have any memories of that short line period with your dad, or?
Oh yeah, he worked there until like 2018 or something like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't remember him when he was train crew. He was always chief mechanical officer by the time my memories, but it was nice because I got to to work with him quite a bit. So
Yep, yep. That's awesome. I mean, those kind of bonding things just last the rest of your life. And this is how you guys got the railroad bug, obviously. And that's
Well,
actually a pretty familiar tale. I think a lot of people have that same kind of.
for sure. Neither out. I mean, obviously, with our pedigree, we've been around a lot of locomotives doing recordings, sound recordings and whatnot. And neither one of us can get on an EMD switcher without, just falling asleep just because it's comfortable. That's just so what we're used to.
For hours, just sitting there idling, and
Or 10 mile an hour down the line, just rocking back and forth.
It's not always the most scintillating thing in the world, but there's still a lot of merit to it, isn't there?
Yep, sure is.
So what was the first model railroad related activity that you guys had? Was it through Bowser?
I worked for English's, which is Bowser's store. I think I started there at 17 or 18, just working part-time, and went off into the Marine Corps, came back out. I had Crohn's disease. So at the time I was in and out of work, having some surgeries and things like that. So I was looking for ways to make ends meet and started doing some custom painting. And somebody asked me to build a Bowser steam engine. So I never built one before, and Lou English was still alive back then. So
it's all white metal parts, right?
It is. Yep. Just
not a 5-minute job.
No, not really. And a lot of skills that take some time to acquire if you've never done it. But I had the advantage that Lou English was right there, 20 minutes away. So I could go up to him and sit with the master and have him teach me exactly how these things are built. And
wow,
he showed me all the tips and tricks of it. And before I know it, his son Lee was asking me if I'd build, a couple hundred a year. And I said, absolutely not.
Right. That's factory work.
Yeah. But I said, put my name in your, on your website, and I'll custom build for people. And as time went on, he needed some help doing some artwork and some other things. And I ended up before long being the production manager for Bowser. So at that point, Alec was becoming of age and was looking for a job. So he started working up there as well, doing some artwork and
summer jobs up there.
Yeah.
So this was all computer related things, basically, Alec?
Yeah. I was too young to run the pad printing machine or the injection molding machine, so he had me on the computer.
Gotcha. And you just kind of took to it and been there ever since, basically, right?
Pretty much.
So I don't even know if that was like just post high school. So from there,
I was still in high school because it was during the summer.
Oh, right.
Interesting. How long did this whole Bowser period go on for?
For Alec, it was a couple years because he ended up then going off into Penn Tech and going to school for some design jobs. And I was there for 6 or 7 years before I ended up. Well, we decided at that point to go ready to run. When I first started there, everything was kit, and ready to run was still a fairly new thing. I mean, people were doing it, but it was not everybody was yet.
Right.
So I was there during that period, and the whole executive line for Bowser, that was something that was started while I was there. Ended up going to China for the first time and kind of getting that set up.
That early, wow.
Kind of have mixed emotions about that these days, but
right.
It is what it is. But from there, I got to know the DSU guys, and when it was time for them to need somebody to manage that company, we talked, and I was able. One of the deals was that I would still need to be able to consult with Bowser. They were like family to me. I didn't really want to leave them, but Lee was very encouraging. He was always wanting us to better ourselves, and he would never hold us back in any way. So
I recall, I don't know how long you had been with the issue when I ran into you, but I remember Confalone knew I was going to Prototype Rails, in January, and he said, you should talk to this guy, Matt Herman, when you're down there. He's got some interesting ideas. And I think we ended up sitting next to each other at one of the dinners or something. And like the rest is history, right? So that was probably what, a couple of years in for you then? Or?
Yeah, probably a couple of years, because we started that out of my home, actually not too far from where I'm at right now, in fact. But then we ended up moving in with Bowser a few years later. We rented some space from them, and had to move at one point because they sold a building, and got even closer to Bowser because then we were in the same building. And so we've always had a real close-knit relationship with Lee and the whole Bowser family. So
yep, and probably still do.
And we absolutely still do.
I'm doing some design work. I go up every week, and I'm drawing the C415s right now for them. So
I spent a very interesting couple of hours with him one time when I was. This goes back quite a number of years, but okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Looks good. I was naively thinking that I wanted to produce a few freight cars myself, that it didn't look like anybody was going to do them. And this was, before Molico, before Tangent, you know what I mean? I didn't know what I didn't know. And Lee gave me the full tour of the place, and then we just kind of sat in his office, and he gave me the whole rundown of what the considerations were. And I remember leaving there thinking, I must be out of my mind. I'm never going to do this. This is way beyond anything that I would have thought would be involved. So I appreciate Lee giving me the time to explain to me why I was delusional about that. That was I think something I needed to know.
He's very open, and I think he likes to teach. Lee's hobby is tool making, so he'll be happy to show you how to do all of that stuff, because that's just what he enjoys doing.
I mean, he had the whole process down. There's no question about it. And I mean, I learned a lot from that discussion. I realized that it's not for the faint of heart. It really isn't. In your current incarnation, you guys have a couple of different gigs going on here. Alec, as I understand it, you've got your own company called Bridgeline Design. Yep. And you're doing a lot of, I mean, I guess it's all, would you call it all CAD at this point that you're doing?
All CAD, 3D, and then a little bit, and I use Affinity Designer, but it'd be the same as what's the Adobe one?
Adobe Illustrator,
but that's where I draw the etchings in as Designer, but everything else is drawn in Fusion 360.
So you're doing, so if there's a product that's offered through you guys, let's say, you can design in CAD everything that's going into that.
Yep, everything but the trucks and couplers.
Right. Why reinvent the wheel?
I have done a pair of trucks. I don't like doing trucks.
Because
they're just well, now that I got the axle spacing, it's not a big deal, but it's just you got to draw them in a way that resin sometimes wants to warp, and you got to try and counteract that. And then just I've never been a huge truck nerd. I don't, they're all they're like 100 tons and 70 tons, of course, and roller bearings, and then the old standard bearings. But
naively, I think there's got to be trucks available for everything that we need, but probably not, right?
And who there's not, there's a few companies out there that are doing 3D printed trucks that look great. So it's just not something I feel.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. Literally.
So I guess I would ask, which came first, the Bridgeline Design or the 3D Central, which is your company, Beth?
So when we were working for ESU, I was selling some throttle stands for the ESU throttles, because it's something we could never get the Germans to make. I was selling them under the Bridgeline Design thing, so that when we started this, I just kept using the name.
Okay.
And Alec has a bunch of things that he wants to do on his own.
Right, he doesn't work for you. He works with you on things that you'd like him to do.
Yep. So he's one of the multiple designers that we've kind of brought under what I like to call the umbrella of 3D Central.
All right, so let's make sure we understand what the heck 3D Central is, because it's not your classic business model. It's like a co-op almost, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Honestly, that's probably a fairly good term for it. So you know, in January, my life changed a little bit. Obviously, you know, Alec and I moved on from ESU, and you know, I know that there's people out there wondering, oh, is he going to talk about that? No, we're not going to talk about that. Basically, just that we've gone our separate ways. We had some, you know, different ideas on how to run the company, and at the end of the day, it wasn't my company, so we just decided to move on. They're still doing very well. You know, the product is excellent still. A lot of it is still what Alec and I have worked with, and you know, we're doing our best to help make sure that those high standards are kept there. But at that point, we needed to do something a little bit different. So we had a little bit of time to figure that out. And as time went on, I was just helping Alec doing some design work for John at Caslow Shops, who's
now before you go further with that though, and maybe I don't have this right, I thought that originally some of the ideas for things that you were going to produce that you were asking Alec to draw up were because you needed them for your own layout.
And that's just it. So John at Caslow was already making a lot of British Columbia type prototype models, which is what I model. So I had asked Alec, hey, at some point, there's a couple cars here I'd like, and I'm guessing that John would probably be interested in the designs. So it's kind of a win-win. I get some cars, and I'm sure he'd pay you for the design work. So as that was happening, I would just be testing and building models, and you know, making some suggestions. We started getting into some of the etchings, and we test fit and make sure everything was going to work well and would build up properly.
So let me pause you a little bit because I want to make sure I understand, and I'm sure everybody else does too. Caslow is not, or is 3D printing things also? Because I was thinking as a resin casting.
They started off as a poured resin company like 98, so they're not a young company. I've known John for years. I began being a Canadian modeler. I was building Caslow ST50 and 60Fs years, actually the same time period that I was getting in with Bowser. I was custom painting. It was within months probably of that same time that I met John.
I have a bunch of Caslow GP10 shells that I had bought for projects that I no longer am interested in doing, you know, I mean, so yes, I'm familiar with the quality of them.
So a lot of it was, at that point, it was all poured resin. 3D wasn't really in the, you know, it wasn't at the level that it's at today for sure. You know, really in those days, printing wasn't even an option. Nobody thought of that yet. Not at this level, at least.
How long ago did it become a viable option? Couple, 3 years ago when it really kind of hit that sweet spot?
I'd say it was longer than that, because when I worked at Bowser, so I was working till Bowser until 2010. And I know 2008, 2009, Lee and I went to the Javits Center to the big developer show there. And you know, we were looking at 3D print technology and robots and all that kind of stuff back then. It was in its infancy at that point, but we both knew at that point that this was gonna change.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So we,
all right, go ahead.
We've just always been kind of looking at that. We've always been interested in it as just a hobby more than anything else. And when this all came about, Alec and I had been doing a little bit of 3D printing. We had a couple printers, and you know, we realized, hey, we can make some stuff just for our layouts.
So what kinds of things did you start out trying to make?
Well, Alec was doing East Broad top stuff. That's one of his hobbies, or one of his interests, I should say.
I was trying to think of an example of something you need for the layout and it's not available. And
one thing I started and never finished because I could never get happy with it is I started drawing D&H signals because they have that unique signal. Now that I've learned a bit more, I want to tackle it again. I might combine etchings now that I know how to do that with some of the printing for some of the fine details I just couldn't get the print right. And printers are getting better, but I think some of it would just be better as etched metal. It'll be a little more durable.
And when it's fine, it can be fragile, right?
That's right. That's the bigger problem right now.
So let me ask you this, Alec. So let's take your signal as an example. I would look at that and say, okay, from a starting point, what are you basing the dimensions on? Are there accurate plans out there that you can kind of draw these dimensions from?
Yes. Someone had sent me some dimensions from when he had measured it. Just to custom build himself ones. That's how I thankfully had that. If I wouldn't have had that, we weren't too far away. We would have just gone and measured one.
Okay, but I mean, there's no substitute for that. You got to start with the accurate measurement, right?
I've drawn one car without measurements, it was not pleasant.
Well, I can
It was a
imagine.
lot of trying
When-
to scale off of pictures and just
Right,
and then it came down to a lot of, oh, I guess that looks good.
right. But it wouldn't necessarily stand up to the micrometer, would it?
No.
Now I've actually gotten drawings for it since then, and I'm actually surprised how well it turned out and how well it actually matches the
Interesting.
drawing.
I know that when I and this is going back quite a few years, but when I decided to offer the concrete telephone booths there, that I needed for my line, I literally had to go out and find one and measure it. And Mike Bednar was kind enough to vector me in on one that was, I think it was the former State Line and Sullivan branch, and there's no tracks there, and it's basically in front of somebody's house. and Dave and I drove up to it and got out and started looking at it, and the guy came out and he said, "Hey, can I help you?" And I said, "Well, here's what I'm doing. I hope that's not a problem." He said, knock yourself out. Just wanted to know what these two geeky looking guys from Massachusetts were doing in his front yard, I'm sure. So it's surprising how many pieces of dimensional information were needed just for something like that, but I think it ended up being a fairly accurate concrete phone booth, right? I'd seen some other offerings that just kind of looked, pretty like carved out of a bar of soap kind of a thing. And I wanted something better than that, but you guys are doing, well, you started out doing, I guess, freight cars, right? And I just know how much goes into getting a freight car and all the details for it exactly right. So what's the first freight car that you guys decided to do?
The first one I had done a few of the East Broad Top things, but I was still learning how to draw there. So that
right. I get, maybe I'm thinking like a commercial product.
The first one that was offered for sale, and the first one that really turned out well would be the Evans double door boxcar.
Oh. Yeah,
that one right there, Matt.
Doing two at one time, so I don't have one. Oh yeah, I do have one.
Grab the second project.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, that's I think that's the first one that I noticed from you guys as well.
That I really finished, and that's when I got in touch with John, and he helped me learn how to do the etchings and stuff like that. So
for that car, what did you base all of your dimensions and measurements on?
A few different drawings, pictures. You can scale from pictures. If you have one dimension and you got a nice straight on picture, then you can kind of.
Right. I guess doors tend to be very known dimensions, right? And you can.
You would think so.
Well, you would, yeah. They're not though.
There's a lot of different.
They are. In the model world, I found that they can vary quite a bit, even if they're supposed to be like both 9-foot doors. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So that model that you just held up, Matt, that is a 3D printed model that was printed by Caslow?
This one was printed in-house by us, but
Caslow
was also printing them.
Okay.
So to kind of just quickly recap, because we kind of got out of sync with it.
Right.
So
let's get back to what the heck 3D Central is and how it all works.
Right. So when we were kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, I need to kind of figure out now what I'm going to do when I grow up again.
This, by the way, is not atypical. You go through life, particularly as a little bit of entrepreneuring spirit, and you got to reinvent yourself periodically. Right. Things change.
Yep. So I decided I was going to learn to draw, and I was just going to have a new company making freight cars. And the more I spent time with Fusion and learning that process, I'd be around Alec and watching him whip around, and he just ticked me off because I couldn't do that. So I started to get a little nervous. I was like, well, now what am I going to do? That's what I was going to fall back on. I mean, I can do it. It's just, I'm not as proficient by any means. So, and then Jason Miller, a Reading modeler from Australia, he's seen what we were doing for Casual Shops, because I was just posting pictures that, I'm building this will be coming, just just consulting on the side, you know, no
Right.
one gets paid
And
for
he
it.
had been
Have fun.
posting pictures of his, things he was building for himself
Yes.
and
Jason's
all the
been doing
different
a
3D
lot of
printers
different
he was
ready
buying
stuff.
and all of that. I mean, it seems like when people get into it, all they do is buy the next greatest 3D printer, which is cheaper and better all the time, right?
Well, 3D printing is definitely a hobby within itself,
Right.
but he wanted to do this and he's very good at it. It's just the challenge of trying to ship
Prolific.
to the United States and all of that was something that he couldn't quite figure out how to overcome. So he was talking to a few people, and as he was seeing us do more and more for John at Caslow, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, is there any chance that maybe you guys could do some printing and packaging for me, just so that I wouldn't have to go through the international shipping lanes and all that?" And
Right.
all of a sudden, it
He
just
would be
clicked.
he would be the Australian Alec.
Essentially, yes. Yep. So it just clicked that, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I don't have to worry about drawing. If I've got multiple designers that work with me,
Right.
they can design. And then it just evolved very quickly. I mean, it was just like rapid fire. Well, then I could have all kinds of tools. I could have, there are so many guys out there that, just as you said, I can buy a 3D printer, and just like we did, and make stuff for myself. And then as we get it done, people are interested. So we have all these, what I like to call basement designers now, making these really cool things, and they're very good at it. And they think, well, I can start a business and I can sell stuff. And
That's a
some of
whole
them do.
different gig.
They do
Yeah.
pretty good. But then there's others that they find out, well, now I've got to source boxes. I've got to write up instructions. I got to try to figure out how to get etchings and couplers and wire and labels. And then I have to deal with customers. And sometimes customers aren't really that fun to deal with if you're not used to that. Things get returned, things get damaged in the mail. And then it becomes a job and it's just not fun anymore. So
Right.
I've done that part. I can go to shows, I can sell things, I can
I
get,
mean, that's really your core
network.
competency. It doesn't hurt to know exactly how it all works.
Right. So I kind of put it out there. This is what I was going to do. We started putting some things out with Jason. I decided I would do some of my own cars as well, but I'm not drawing them. I'm having Alec do that for me. I'm kind of hired him as Bridgeline Design to do my drawings for me. Plus, he's doing his own cars and other things. I've actually got a couple other designers now that are going to do some 3D Central cars as well as their own things. So one by one, more and more just started coming to us as they were seeing what we were doing and the quality that we were lucky enough to get. Everybody keeps asking, "Oh, how are you getting this? How are you getting that?" Dumb luck. We've just,
well, I'm sure they weren't all
figured it out.
successes either, right?
No, I tell you what, for every success, there was probably 4 or 5 failures on it at first.
Right.
But the advantage that I had was I wasn't doing this after hours. I wasn't doing this at nighttime, after the family went to bed and all of that.
This
This is
was
now
your
my
job.
job. So,
Right.
Spending hours for a couple weeks on end, just watching YouTube videos, learning what others are doing, trial and error by error by error, till I finally got to a point that I was happy with. And
how long did that phase take, roughly? Are we talking months, weeks?
I would say it was a good hard month until I was really deciding, what, I can make this work.
1 month.
Yeah, I mean, which doesn't seem like a lot,
No,
but
it doesn't.
I tell you what, though, when it's 1 month at 12, 16 hours a day, every single day.
Right.
Again, it's my job. It's full time.
Yeah, you're drinking from a fire hose too, in terms of information.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And you know what? Necessity breeds that. So, when you get into a position where it's, we've got to eat, so we've got to figure this out. We've got to make this work if we're going to do it.
Right.
And it helped. And
very motivating.
it is. Well, I hope so.
But also, I think, you guys have always been the kind of people who just, when you sink your teeth into something, you just go for it.
Well, and we're passionate about what we do, that's for sure. And, we did that at Bowser, we did that at ESU, and, we're definitely doing it here.
Still do it. It's baked in.
Yeah.
So many questions come to mind while you're talking about all this, and I don't want to interrupt you every 2 seconds, but one of the first questions that I thought of was, okay, you're doing all these cars. What drives interest in doing a particular car besides the fact that it's not currently available?
will it be available and do I want it?
So there's a lot of selfish self-interest there, which is a very healthy thing.
And then, and as we go, there's people suggesting stuff too. So
for sure. The
especially
one advantage. Go ahead, Alex. Say that again.
Matt's cars will be venturing more into the just what we think will sell. The Bridgeline design branded stuff will probably be more my interest or what I
Yeah,
want.
and there's nothing wrong with that because every project you do ramps up your skill set too.
It'll either be narrow gauge D&H or pictures of a freight car that my dad had on the D&H if it was from another railroad. Like the one I'm working on currently is not a D&H car, but it's the one that my dad has pictures of in Whitehall.
Gotcha.
Started away a number of years ago now, and he was pretty young. He was only 62, and there's a lot of things that we've gotten to do now that he would have loved to be able to participate in. So
yeah.
For years, we've decided to do what we can to kind of honor him through this. And, what would Dad have liked,
That's
so
awesome.
we'll try to hit those things, we'll try to include him or at least his memory into a lot of what we've done. So in our modeling downstairs in the basement, that we have a D&H section of the layout for Alec, and that's low, so he can operate on that in a rolling chair. And the other two levels are the BC, and that D&H, we grew up next to it, so that was something that Dad really enjoyed. He has a lot of pictures of it. So, but I would say, kind of going back to that same question, how do we pick those things to begin with? Alec he hit the nail on the head with the passion to what we're interested in. But for me, a lot of it too is what can be made. The advantage of 3D printing is that there's things that we can do in 3D printing that can never be done in injection molded plastic without many pieces. We can 3D print one section, one piece that can't go into an open and closed mold.
What comes to mind? Like think about the Tangent G43 gondola.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. That's the car. That's one of the cars I talked to Lee about. When he explained to me what would be involved in trying to do that, that's when I decided,
Yeah.
and Dave pulled it off with the multiple pieces and the ingenious way the thing goes together. That's a perfect example of what you're talking about. If you tried to do that as a one-piece body, it wouldn't leave the mold.
Well, and everybody's heard numbers out there of what tooling costs. So, if you want to tool up a car, it's got to be able to sell a couple thousand pieces at least, or your piece price it's got to be amortized across that, and you got to make a little money. So then your cars start getting into the 70, 80 range because you're only able to make a couple hundred if it's a rare thing.
I'm sure you're not going to get into the arithmetic of how you arrive at selling prices and how that relates to your cost and all that, because that's obviously proprietary information. I look behind you and I see big investment in 3D printers back there. We'll get to that, but it's not like 3D printing. The actual materials are the least of it, right?
Right.
It's that machine.
It's time and drawing, and that's the basic of it. I mean, yes, you have some machines to run stuff, but I'll be honest with you, even on that, those prices continue to come down and the quality continues to go up. So, and it can certainly be done for a reasonable amount. I've invested a lot because I have a lot of machines, and we have currently, since we've opened the website here 2 or 3 weeks ago, we have up to 10 partners at the moment. Different designers, some of them just straight OEM that we do bulk for. Some of them are very open. Jason Miller, he was the first one. Actually, I'm supposed to remind everybody, and I'm kind of excited about it too. As I'm doing the show recording here, he's releasing a brand new item tonight, and it's actually in honor of you, or at least inspired by you, because a couple of days ago you were building forklifts.
Forklifts, yes.
So Jason is probably already live here. He has just announced a 70s era forklift, all one-piece print. So you don't have to assemble it. You don't have to,
just paint it,
glue it together. It's just you paint it. And we'll get into some of that in a minute here too, because there are some considerations that we have to have in that. But
have you printed that design?
Not yet. He's still just kind of doing some final proofing of the prints, and that's the nice thing about working with the different designers. We all communicate very well. How are you supporting things? Because you have to support every print. You can't just throw it in the machine and hit print. You have to set it up. Here's here's an N scale underbody that's completely supported. So we have to have all that support structure in there so that it holds everything up while it's printing. And I'll show you the machines and kind of give you a little bit more of a rundown.
Yeah,
of how it
so
works in a
so how
moment.
does all that get trimmed away? Is it pretty thin, the support structure?
So we have we've been actually, I know it came on my end from John from Casual Shops. He got it from somebody else, but we have kind of a special way and special support shapes that we use.
Mhm.
But I can actually open this up and take this off
A little
almost
higher.
immediately. But this took a lot to figure out. Oh, sorry. But I just basically break it away, but not everybody does it this way. And I never did it this way. It took me a while to figure this process out too.
Yeah.
Now, what was happening in the past was we would support things with a lot of bigger supports. You know, we didn't really understand quite the ease of how
And
that
then it
could
was
be
harder
done.
to get the supports
Oh.
off.
It was terrible. You were breaking parts doing it. You
Right.
got to think you want to take supports off if you can. Sometimes before you cure it, because it hardens when you cure it, then things get brittle.
I
It's
noticed
softer if
that,
you
like
do it
with my
before, but
little road gates that Jim Lincoln drew up for me, the upright parts and some of the little latches and things like that can get very brittle when you're trying to take them off the support structure. These were designed and printed quite a while ago, you know, so I imagine that the technology has gotten better in that regard. But when I looked at your support structure there, it almost looked like there's more material supporting it than the actual part.
there are cars that are like that. Like here's another one. This is a 62-foot log bunk car, skeleton log car. You know, it's a very small car overall, but
Right.
all of that support structure actually weighs more than the car itself when I take
Well,
it
I
off.
believe it. And like with something like that, how does that car get sufficient weight to track properly?
Well, obviously, if you can run it loaded, that's going to help.
Sure.
Well, I do have another one here. So here's the same car with some parts on it with the bunks themselves.
Yep.
There's some openings in the bottom so that we can add some
Lead shot or something.
or some lead shot type stuff in the bottom of that as well.
Depleted uranium.
Yeah. I keep in the back room. I don't
Okay,
like to,
yeah, you don't want that.
kinda...
You don't want that under the counter.
Yeah, it's nice at nighttime though. Everything glows in here. So
now I understand that with 3D printing, certain printers will actually print metal, correct? That's not something that you're looking to get into.
we're not there yet on our end, but it's definitely being done. And you know, it prints in metal, but then you have to have a forge to sinter it and everything. So,
oh, really?
So there's a process to that, but we are getting there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's actually there's hardened high temperature plastic that you can actually mold, injection mold plastic into. So there's all kinds of things that can be done here. The 3D printing, it is the future, whether we like it or not. That process, or you know, there's very similar processes are going to shape. You know, hey, look at Star Trek. We're going to be making food in here, and
Right. I was reading an article about they 3D printed a house.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Bowser uses not whole locomotives, but they use some 3D printed parts in their production, like the RS3s has some 3D printed parts on them.
Like the exhaust stack or something like that?
The exhaust stack, on the D&H RS3s, there's that box behind the cab. That's 3D printed.
This is on the RS3M, right?
On the first run, the phase 3 RS3, so the 1508 that they got.
Oh, on the walkway, you mean?
Yep, on the walkway. There's that little box that's 3D. If you would break it off and turn it upside down so you could see the paint where it wasn't painted, it's clear green resin.
Wow. So you got 3D printing, I guess, has come a long way in that a lot of the stuff that you show, it doesn't have that line effect like I've seen in so many other 3D printed parts. Now, is that an optical illusion on my part, or are they there if you really know how to look for it? Or
I'm going to show you that in just a moment. I don't have one close enough to me that's got it, but it is something that we fight with on a daily basis. It has to do with your angles when you're printing. It has to do with your support. It has to do with Sometimes you have some bracing inside the car that gives you pull forces on inside the vat of liquid.
Really?
And again, I can show you that on the machines when we get
All
to
right.
that point. I'll touch on some of those little things.
The underframe that you showed was up at an angle. Is that so that it fits on the platter that's being printed on?
In some cases, that's why it's done that way, but in others, it's more because if you think about 3D printing, so basically you've got a vat of liquid that sits on top of the equivalent of a tablet, like a phone tablet. So on that tablet are a whole bunch of, well, the type of printing that we're doing. There's multiple types of printing. So, but the type of printing we're doing, it sits on this tablet, and a tablet, like any tablet, has a whole bunch of pixels that light up. So in our case, we're using UV light pixels. So when those pixels light up, they harden the resin. It's all UV hardened resin that we're using. It goes in as a liquid, UV hits it, it hardens up, and it hardens fast. Sometimes it's just a couple seconds that you're hitting that with light, and that's your layer. And then the print head will come down. It'll, it's everything's off that print head. So it'll pull that out of the vat, let resin drip back down in, come back down just to one more layer height higher. That pixel will light up again. It'll pull itself back out, go back down, and it'll continue that process.
So other pictures of 3D printing that I've seen, the print head was just sort of laying it out like toothpaste, and
that's an FDM printer. It uses filaments.
Right. So this is not what you guys are doing.
That's nice for big objects, but it's gonna leave. It's not as smooth, and it doesn't do details as well as what resin printing does.
Very interesting. Okay.
And there's different types of resin. There's a lot of things. There's different heights in your layers. There's tons of things that will affect your layer lines. And that's what I spent a month learning how to avoid, honestly.
It doesn't sound like that much time, Matt. It really doesn't.
Well, and I'm not there yet either. Everybody's impressed at how well we're doing and the quality that we're putting out, but I'm not there yet. I'll tell you, there are improvements that I look at every single day.
Right.
The nice thing about this, model trains aren't the only thing that are 3D printed. Every industry out there. I mean, this was designed for prototyping. So you could print a device of whatever it is, make sure everything's going to work with that, make sure the tolerance is correct, whatever, for a lot cheaper than, as we said earlier, making a mold of something or coming up with all of the tools to create that part. So, we do the same thing here. We print it, we see how it works, and then we make an alteration. Maybe we change how we're printing it. Maybe we change the design of the drawing to make it print better.
Yep.
But I mean, because every industry is using this technology, they're all learning together. So there's tons of info out there.
Yeah, I got you.
It's not hard to pick up on it if you, just spend some time to do it. The info's there. You just got to learn it. So.
If you were going to print a boxcar like the one you showed me, how long does it take to print a boxcar?
Also very variable. It depends on your layer height, how much you weight when the print head comes down to print.
Let's talk about that boxcar.
Well, I printed it multiple ways. That's part of the experiment. You need to find out.
There's multiple ways to print it.
Yes.
Basically, it goes by layer height and how tall the object is in resin printing. So it does a whole layer at once. So whether you have one car on there or 6 cars on there, that doesn't change your amount of time. It's the layer height, your settings for each layer, and how tall the object is.
I see. How big is the work area that you can print?
Depends on the machine.
Okay.
I've got 2.
We'll see that. I'm getting ahead of myself.
And I'll show you some of the differences. This car right here, this was a 38-hour print. The one time that I printed it. Another time that I printed it, it was about 19 hours. It just depended how, again, I had it angled. I had the layer heights. The speed of the machine going up and down can be adjusted.
What am I looking at there, man? It looks like an RDC mated with a caviar.
This is in your neck of the woods. This is a New Haven Roger Williams.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
This is an IHP model. So we don't print and ship IHPs, but we do print them for him in bulk, and he does all the packaging and distribution himself. Actually, the underframe that I showed you earlier, that's for his silver liner and an end scale.
Wow.
Now there's one with it in, but it was with one before it went flying. So there's an N scale car. Here's an HO car, both 85 foot. This one takes about 13 hours to print the way that I've got it, and it's about as good as it's gonna get, which is still pretty darn good.
It looks excellent from here.
Yeah, I know this is an HD camera, but getting it to focus right.
Right.
I don't know if I can do it, but
I don't think coming
regardless,
closer helps.
not necessarily. But again, I went from a 13-hour print to a 38-hour print just by changing the scale there. And a little
Wow.
different machine, and processes are a little different.
So the businessman in me says, if it takes 38 hours to print one shell, how many hundreds of dollars does that shell cost?
Well, it is time for sure. And the time aspect of it, I can be doing a whole bunch of other things. So the
Sure.
machine's running time. So in order to increase that, or I should say increase the product and decreasing the time that you can get it in, you buy more machines.
Right.
So
How many of those Roger Williams can you fit on a build plate?
that's another good question. So in this case, I can fit 4 of these in one machine at one time.
Okay.
In
So
that
it's 38
hours, I'm
divided by
getting 4
4.
pieces. Yeah, of the bodies. And then I have to print the under frames. I have to
Yep.
print the small parts. They're usually on different machines. So still within that time period, I can get an entire piece for it. But
Is that going to be a powered model?
I believe in this one, they're not. They're stationary, but he may be working on a mechanism. I'm afraid I don't know all of that. But
Yeah. Are you doing truck side frames and things like that for
we
it?
are, yeah. So let's see here. Give me 1 second. I'll grab one. I thought I had one over here. Oh, I do, right here. So there's the truck side frame on the support structure still.
Okay, right there is good.
Yeah, it went and then it came back. There we
Yeah,
go.
that's excellent. Yeah.
So that is on the support.
Is that something you drew, Alec?
No, this is all designed from IHP. He does it
Okay.
himself.
Yeah, so Mike Bartell is doing his own design work. So he provides me with drawings. I support it.
Yep.
I have to put that support structure in and then print it and send him back full production.
Back a
ready
little bit,
packaged.
Matt.
Yeah,
There you go.
something like that. There. Well, it's coming and going. This camera's
Yeah,
not the best for focusing, but
Okay.
sorry. The longer I try, the worse it's getting. So, but yeah, so it just depends on the item, to what you're gonna get time wise. Now we are up to currently 9 printers. I'm working on my 10th one here. Actually, just 2 days ago, I got my 9th one. I have different printers for different things. These 85-foot HO cars, we have to have a bigger printer. So I use
Sure.
LW Jupiters, which are big machines. I can fit O scale into those machines.
Let's talk about the models a little bit more, but then I think the shop tour would be very interesting
Sure.
to get to because frankly, I've never seen, a 3D printing shop. So I think everybody would enjoy seeing that. Let's take the side slider. That was something that got my attention. And one of the reasons it did was those were going in and out of my Masonite plant, and it was a long-term planned heavy duty kit bash for me, right?
Right.
So Alec, is this one of your drawings?
That is one of mine, yes.
So this
That
is
looks
the
good.
Evans side slider, and I'm gonna move this around 100 times, and it'll get better or worse. So sorry
Yeah.
about that.
That's pretty good right there.
If I can hold still. So this
Let's
is,
see the end too, please.
so this there were 3 versions of this car.
That looks
We've done
really
2
good.
of them so far. Oh come on, like I think that's actually part of the
There
problem.
you go. That's good right there. The 3 versions spanned what time period in actual life?
So
Alec?
the first one was it had 4 plug doors instead of 2 plug doors and 2 sliding doors.
And those were the Masonite cars.
Yeah,
So that's basically a thrall car. A thrall
No,
car.
it's sort of, but it is slightly different. If you know the details to look, it is different.
Yeah, who made that one?
Evans.
Evans?
Yep, it was Evans.
Right.
And then in 76, the first side slider came out, and that would be our early version, we call it. And then in 78, they slightly revised the doors on it, which we did, and we also doing that version. So
Now, do we understand the rationale as to why they went with that design from the all plug door design? Was it just to save weight and money, maybe?
I'm guessing so, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Probably maintenance was a lot easier with 2 sliding doors versus 4 plug doors. So
Right, right. You have a completed model there, Matt?
I don't have one painted at the moment yet, but what I wanted to do was show you. Well, first off, you're going to see that I certainly do have some lines in some of the prints because these models do have them. But what I'm trying to show is the door differences here. So you can see in the main door, you've got different heights of panels in here.
more panels.
Yep.
That top one I've never seen before. That's interesting.
That's a later car.
78 version. So
Okay.
The other thing, and I think I can just barely see it here, you have some raised X panels on the outside doors, whereas on the inside you don't.
Really?
There's a major line that I've got on.
Oh, I can see that if you hold it the right way. Yeah.
Yep.
those won't go out to anybody.
No, one of the things that we've always tried to do is have pretty high standards in what we put out to the public.
Right.
We tried to do that at ESU. We're certainly trying to do it here. I'm going to show you some cabs from Jason Miller from his Scale 3D Productions company that I have some that I printed earlier that I can see that disorientation in it. And then I have some that I've just printed and changed how things are oriented on the bill plate, and I've made those go away. So
now, once you get it to print the way you'd like, is that pretty consistent from that point on? Like you've solved the problem and you're going to get a fairly consistent product?
You can hit an environmental problem if you have to have everything heated properly. The resin has to be able to flow nicely. So you want to try to be consistent with your temperatures. You're talking
about the ambient temperatures in the building.
And well, not just in the building, but also where each of my printers is in its own enclosure. We have a heater in some of the cases, there's a heater in the printer, my big printers. In other cases, I've got an IKEA cabinet with 2 spaces inside, and I have a heater with a fan that's circulating air, so we keep each of those its own temperature. It's hooked up to a thermometer, and it turns the heater on and off to maintain that.
Interesting. And is exhausting of any fumes a factor as well?
Yep, and we've taken care of that as well. Actually, the resin that I'm using isn't that bad. Some resin's really bad, some resin's not that bad. It all varies. Every brand is different,
but some of it smells worse than others.
Yeah. You have your VOCs and all that kind of stuff you got to worry about, because even though it doesn't smell bad, it doesn't mean it's not bad for you. So you really do want to get some of that out of there. I don't really smell the resin too much. I never really did with the resin that we're using, but the alcohol bath, because then after you get it out of the resin, you have to wash it to get all the excess resin off. We wash it twice. We wash it in a dirty bath and then a clean bath. And then
is it just a matter of just rinsing it in it, or do you actually have to scrub it?
We have machines that do it.
So there's a tub and there's an agitator in the bottom that spins inside of it. And
I'll show you that momentarily.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, you've got a bunch of models in front of you. How about showing us some of the different things that you're producing right now?
So along with the Evans double door 5450 that Alec did first, we did one of the other things I needed for my layout was wood chip cars. The BC had a ton of wood chip cars. We're talking thousands. So we ended up making the NSC wood chip cars, and
didn't one of those make it up to the Allagash?
Yep, I was just mentioning that. I did a couple up for Mike for his Allagash, and I altered that one a little bit. It's not really any particular prototype, but along with that version that we did the version that has the plate on the side of it. The end panels also changed a little bit. Some had 9 ribs, some had 8 ribs. So we tried to pay attention to that.
Is the plate printed, or is it a separate piece added on?
The panel itself is 3D printed, and we couldn't just do it as an etching or anything like that, because it has bolt detail It's actually 2 plates that are bolted together on the prototype. So
Wow.
we did our best to try to replicate that.
So
It
it
is
is
done
built as part of the car as you're printing.
Nope, that's an entirely separate piece. I
Okay.
don't have one separate here to show you, but it's
Yeah,
got
yeah.
some real detail on the back so that it
Some of
can.
the cars had it, some of them didn't. If they all would have had it, we would have 3D printed it on the car.
I gotcha. So it makes it more versatile.
These plates were notorious for falling off, as you know, they were beat to heck for one thing. Sometimes they were lifted up and shook to get the stuff out. They had vibrator plates on here that they could vibrate the car, so they were constant movement. And then just
I guess the loads would freeze under certain conditions, right?
Yep, for sure. So these plates, sometimes part of the plate would come off. So Alec actually modified one in the drawing so we could print just half of it.
Right.
So we can, that nose is just the dogwood and BCR, which is kind of neat. So I did one of those cars up and had it all painted, just about ready to dull coat it. And my hand hit it and it rolled off the desk and shattered on the floor. So I'll have to do another one of those up. But
so that does bring up a question. So I mean, I think sooner or later everybody has something hit the floor. I mean, I've had 3 locomotives hit the floor. It's not a good day when that happens. How fragile is a 3D printed car compared to an injection molded plastic?
I mean, we use an ABS type resin, they call it. So it's going to have some flexibility to it to a certain degree. But if it hits the floor and it's a hard impact, it's probably going to shatter.
Okay.
It is got a different density to it than ABS. So it is something you do have to just consider a little bit. Here's another version that we did. This is a CN version with an extension that's been put on the top. That's one piece. The extension is added on. In real life, they were added later, but so I masked that and did a slightly different color.
Notice the top is actually a different color, the extension.
Yeah, and I just masked that so it was separate.
That's kind of cool. What's the inside look like, Matt?
Yeah, it's
you got a lot of internal bracing too.
Yeah, so that's how the car is made. They had that in there.
Yeah.
These pieces I did not glue in, so they're falling out a little bit, but
we left them as a separate piece so you could get a weight and a floor in.
Right.
Yeah. And on many of the cars, because they were dumped upside down, a lot of them they were missing, so you could put in what you needed.
Oh, really?
I don't have. I thought I'd grabbed one, but I don't have one that came off the printer raw. But Alec actually designed right in the drawing X bracing that went all the way through the car, and you can just take your finger and run it down, and it'll actually remove that. But because, as Alec said earlier, things can warp and move a little bit as things cure a little bit more and UV light outside. So that X bracing will keep in a built car. It'll keep it straight until you do all your painting and everything. So once you painted it, you can stop some of that UV curing because UV is not going through the paint.
Interesting. Okay.
So just some more considerations.
Or you could just fill it full of sawdust and forget it's there.
Yeah, and I've done some of that too.
Right.
So there's there's better light.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's a little different style. This is probably the 3rd or 4th iteration of bracing that we've used. And some of that bracing is something that we have to keep an eye out for external warping and things, or not warping, but distortions, I guess. I showed you that line in the side slider. That wasn't a print line. That was from a distortion from, something on the inside with build forces, we call it, on the build plate. So
things happen after it comes out of the cleaning device.
It can. What that was from was during the printing, when it's on the build plate, there's some suction across a certain way. So that's why we angle things a little different. It can eliminate some of that. You want the least amount of stuff pulling off the build plate at one time. Or I'm sorry, the vat, not the build plate.
You were saying, Alec?
The resin is held in a vat, and then in the bottom of the vat is lined with there's a few different materials, FEP and a few other things, but it's a clear, it almost looks like thick saran wrap. That's what actually separates the screen from the resin.
Okay.
Normally this would be screwed together. I'm actually replacing the plastic in it right now, but that's a little different type of material. It's called ACF, and it stands for something or other. And I'm not smart enough to remember it at the moment because I didn't write it down. But normally the machines that we're using use an older type of material called FEP. And I've actually found the machines that have this new stuff isn't printing as nice as the FEP. So I'm actually backdating the FEP on these machines, and it's working better. So, yeah.
So the function of that membrane is what, Alec?
It just keeps the resin, it separates the resin from the LCD screen.
Okay.
That tablet that's underneath everything. So,
Huh.
So what else do we do?
Well, that car that had the X braces, the last thing that you showed, I never saw the side of it.
So this is a NSC 40-foot box car. We've done at least 3 different ends for that. Let me see if I can find all 3 of them here at the moment.
You're only gonna find 2.
Yeah, I only have 2 of them here.
Yeah.
So there's the NSC 3 end, and there's the NSC 2. Is that the 2 or the 1, Alec? That's the 2. So slightly different in how it's done, but
yeah,
trying to match the prototypes the best we can. And there again, now we can do versions of cars that the mainline manufacturers doing everything ready to run wouldn't do, because they'd have to tool that up. We just have to change the drawing. So we don't have all these.
So it's no easy thing to try to outthink that, is there? I mean,
not really.
you're trying to outguess what manufacturers are going to do. Now, in some cases, you have friendly relations, and you can kind of.
I have that advantage. I've worked with many of them in previous employment, and those I haven't worked with, I'm often good friends with. So we do communicate a little bit.
Sure.
I've always been one to rather compliment than compete rather. So I sort of know what people are going to be doing, so I can stay away from it, or we can add to it and do something that can run well with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to hold all these up, but here's 5 different versions of those 40-foot cars, and all we did was change a little bit in the drawing. The base dimensions are all the same. Yep. They've all got different doors. They've got different floors in some cases. So this one is a heater car. It's a charcoal heated car, heated insulated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily to keep it warm. It was to keep it from freezing. These are Canadian prototypes.
Yep.
So, well, here's one. Kind of a little bit.
Didn't Moloko make the add-on parts to convert those cars?
Well, those are vents, and a number of different cars had those, so it's very similar to what the Moloko part was.
Yeah,
I've got some of those in the shop right now.
What's all of it underneath? Is that fuel tanks for the heaters?
These are actually charcoal heaters.
Okay.
So these cars, they use chunks of charcoal to keep everything from freezing. Now, we're doing a 50-foot Hawker Siddeley car that used a gas-powered, well, these were actually reefer units. These weren't the heated cars, but so those are fuel tanks. That's a little bit different version. One of the other versions on the 40-foot car that we're doing, that's a grain car.
Grain door, yeah.
So these cars almost always were painted a different color from the grain door. The grain door was either white or yellow. They were CP cars. So we did that as a separate piece. So that way we didn't have to do any masking when we were doing assembly.
Right. Now you're not offering anything that's decorated, right?
I'm not at the moment. I mean, at some point in time, maybe we'll pick up a painter that you can work with directly. Somebody that can do some assembly, but right now we don't have that time really more than anything.
But in some cases, your kits will include decals.
Correct. We're going to be working with Fusion Graphics and Highball Graphics both, and possibly others in the future. But right now, that's kind of who we're working with. Yep. The idea of this business was to create this umbrella that you can come to if you wanted to build a 3D kit. We're going to have multiple designers making all kinds of different things and all kinds of different scales. You can get your tools here. We're going to have sprue cutters and files and, Hunter Houston, everybody knows on Facebook. He's always putting out tools that he finds. Jerry, exactly. He showed me these chisels that work great. I mean, there's all kinds of that kind of stuff we're going to have. I don't know if I'm going to get into paint, only because there's a shelf life for paint. You never know what
Absolutely.
colors people are going to get. So
I would say
hesitant on
stay
that.
far away from paint.
The only thing I may do with paint, maybe carry some primers. We often tend to use Tamiya fine surface primer in a spray can. There are a couple colors on that, but they all go pretty well. So it's something I will probably try to have. Couplers, trucks. We're going to be trying to work with Dave from Tangent and probably Nick from Moloko and some others. Where I've just talked to Adam from Plate C Models. Alec mentioned earlier that there's somebody making good 3D printed trucks, and Adam makes a ton of them. All kinds of different versions. He's also making freight cars. I just saw the list of freight cars that he's going to be working on over the next year or two here, and they're all going to be provided through 3D Central.
That was my next question. Okay.
Yep.
So none of that is official yet, like it's not on the website yet?
We're just kind of finalizing everything right now. We're going to announce it with a brand new car that he hasn't announced yet. So he just sent me most of the drawings for that tonight, as a matter of fact, and so I'm pretty excited about it.
So I will have to defer to you, because I know about some things that you're doing that you haven't talked about yet. So I won't say anything, but what else you got that you can talk about?
Well, the biggest thing is the number of and the quality of our partners. So I've just started again working with, and I'm going to butcher her name, so I apologize in advance once she starts to listen to this. She's from Austria. Her name is Sarah, and I've written it down so that I don't make it too bad, but it is Sarah Greisenbock. So she is, without a doubt, one of the best modelers I've ever witnessed. Her quality standards, her abilities are just, they're outstanding. So she's someone that I'm going to try to get on your show, Mike, because I have a feeling she's going to be a really interesting person for you to talk to.
Now, is she doing foreign prototypes or all kinds of things?
She models United States in like the 40s. So a lot of passenger equipment, steam. She's doing a lot of freight cars, 40-foot box cars, odd roofs. She's 3D printed, same principle as what we started with. Yep. Somebody was making stuff for themselves. She's very much about helping the industry and the hobbyist as a whole. So she was putting her files out for free. And I spoke with her and I said, hey, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that you do that. But there are people who don't have printers. So maybe we could work together to try to help get those people some parts. So we're going to help print those. Now, obviously, there will be a charge for them because there is just some work to get it out there. But it's work to do it yourself too, so we can shortcut some of that.
So let me go back to a question before I forget it, because so many questions arise during the course of talking about all this. So obviously you're printing X number of things that are going to be available direct from you on your website.
Correct.
There's other things that Kaslo is printing, but you'll be selling?
Sure. So John and I have a little bit different system worked out. So Kaslo does their own printing in Canada, but we're into that same situation that we were in with Jason Miller of Scale 3D Productions, whereas we have the border now to deal with. So all of the 3D Central cars, and only my cars, John will be printing and shipping to customers in Canada. All of the Kaslo shop cars that he produces, I will be shipping and printing those cars in the United States.
That's a good way to handle that.
We don't have to worry about the border.
No customs.
He's got a good print shop. He's getting better and better every day. We learn from each other. So as he learns things, he helps me. As I learn things, I help him. So that way we keep our quality the same. We keep the way we're doing things the same. We share files, but again, they're just ours. So we go back and forth on that.
Sure. So there are things that you'll see on the Kaslo website that are not on your website, but you'll fulfill the order behind the scenes.
In most cases, there are some things that John does sell that I won't be selling because there's etchings, there's weights, some of it's still poured resin, and to keep an inventory of that type of thing in both locations,
like a different business.
Yeah. So I'm only going to put those items that I can produce on my website. So if you're in the United States and you want to buy a Kaslo item, buy it from me. Just go to my website. If you're in Canada and you want to buy a 3D Central product or Evans cars or some of the next cars that we have coming up, which are pretty exciting. There are BC Hydro and other Canadian Evans cars out there. So if you want those and you're in Canada, buy those directly from John when that becomes available. So we work a little bit different with each manufacturer because they all have different needs.
Sure.
IHP, Imperial Hobby Products, Mike Bartell, he does all of his own shipping. I just produce the parts, he packages and ships them.
You send him a big box.
Yep, pretty much. So I work with, Alec, everything that Alec does is all going to be through our website. We're going to print and ship for him. He wants to just design.
Yep. Now, Alec, you don't have a 3D printer at your place, or do you?
I do have a couple 3D printers. It's nice for prototyping. I don't have to wait for Matt to print something.
Right.
My prints aren't as nice as his, but for my purposes, they'll do fine. If I just need to see, sometimes we're trying to push the envelope a little bit, and I need to see if it'll actually print and
Sure. It's all part of the R&D process in that case, right? You might be able to print something and say, oh, I need to tweak this file.
And we were doing the same thing for John at Caslow, which is kind of how I think Matt got a little into this. So,
So what we found, like Alec doesn't need to have all the lines and everything out of it. So supporting that, putting all those little supports on there, I don't know if I'll be able to show you.
That's the secret sauce, basically, right?
Yeah. Every little support on the car itself, each of those individual lines has to be manually put there, and it just takes time. So, but to make sure that you can check main dimensions and things like that, you don't need to support it like that.
Yeah,
I only do that for final production.
I just throw a few supports on there and get enough that it'll print.
So the idea of having maximum support like that is that during the curing process, it stays dead straight.
It can be.
And the printing process, because it's moving and the resin's somewhat flexible still, especially the supports which are thin. So having more supports helps the piece stay in one spot as it's printing.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I probably over support in a lot of ways, but and that can cause some problems. I've run into places where I've just got too many supports there, and I'm getting those print lines from the actual support itself. So it's something you do got to watch. But
so do you have any other models you want to show?
I can sit here for the next hour and show you models.
I'll show us a few more.
A couple very quickly.
And then we want to see the shop.
I guess I've already showed you this. This is the log car.
Wait a minute, Alec's showing one. Alec, that's sort of disappearing in your background there.
Give me a second to turn my backdrop off.
There we go.
I'm not gonna do any better. I'm gonna have to onboard it.
Okay.
So that's a low nose kit for the Rapido RS11.
Oh yes.
So off of the model, it'll just be that. So actually, they're two separate pieces, nose and cab, snap right into place.
I'm gonna pull the door off and make those an etching so people can have them open if they want.
And that's our good friend Neil Schofield's fault, so you can blame him for that.
And then I did it because I want them, D&H, but I'm gonna do SPs and the Lehigh Valley with the walkway on the nose. And Erie Mining has some neat ones. They had a switcher headlight. I got an EMD switcher. So
I could have used that cab when I did D&H 410 there, the one that got rebuilt, the C420.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a little different, but I've thought about that one too. So
right along those same lines, Alec's going to be doing a ton of D&H cabooses and freight cars. This is I've seen it called a home built caboose. So these were
wasn't this Alex's background?
Yes, that was the drawing of Alec's background.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is these were built from bobber cabooses in the very early 1900s. It was Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, New York State. Yeah, maybe it was New York State.
Pennsylvania.
It wasn't Pennsylvania. They passed a law that said you had to have 4 axles underneath the caboose. So when they did that, D&H had just bought a whole bunch of bobber cabooses, and they had to take them into the shops and rebuild them. And they lengthened them a little bit, and then they put regular trucks underneath them. So, so these were home built, but out of those bobber cabooses, there was center cupolas and cupolas. Ones had no cupolas. So
plywood sheath, regular sheathing on it.
So yes, later on they were rebuilt, and they put a plywood sheathing and got rid of. I don't know if you can see the lines the paneling that they used originally on there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then I don't have a plywood one printed here. I'd show you that as a difference, but then they did rebuild them that way. They had similar ones that were used in other places too, but I started off kind of on the Penn division. They were used for pusher cabooses.
Yeah, when Matt said about Pennsylvania and New York, I thought that's what he was actually talking about. Pennsylvania passed the law; you had to have a steel underframe and some other stuff if you were going to have the caboose ahead of the pushers.
Right.
If you didn't have to have that, you had to cut the pushers in front of the caboose, which
Right.
added
Right.
switching.
And that was also the rationale behind a lot of the heavily steel reinforced Penzi cabooses too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. The N5Cs and things
Right.
like that. Yep. So, and that's something that we haven't touched on. I mean, we've been around this stuff our whole life. So, we were sound guys, but we were also kind of freight car guys. And, this is just us, our passion is trains, no matter what it is. So, we've,
What about locomotive shells? Are we have any
we're
of
doing
those
some
in the works?
locomotive shells. This is one of John's from Caslow shell. This is a SF30C. So it's C30-7 with a more of a modern, more angled nose. This was a Santa Fe prototype.
Yep.
These were some of the best prints I've ever got. I can't take any credit for that. All I did was print the file that John sent me.
Yep.
These just came out outstanding.
That's a cool engine. I remember seeing those in the early 90s when I was out there rail fanning on the Santa Fe.
So this is a Metra, brand new model. We haven't actually. I did get a couple of these out the door when I went to the Chicago RPM here. This is a new an F40C. This will be available from Caslow off their website and mine in the next few days, actually.
And designed for an Atlas chassis or something.
This is made for a Kato SD40-2.
Okay.
These were EMDs. So we did the later version and we just did the original version. So the ditch lights are a little different. The paneling that's going to go on the side is an etching. That's hard to see this here, but this is one that when we talk about the lines, this just has none. This could have been injection molded the way it
looks really good. Yeah.
This is just how it comes out. So
you're gonna do the Crandall cab?
It's actually one that I've thought about. Yep. I'm not gonna say definitely we're gonna do that, but we have all kinds of ideas. So it's just a matter of time more than anything else. But again, as you said, we talked very early. We're looking for things that just aren't really gonna be able to be done. Canadian bulkhead flats. There's two manufacturers making these right now. You can get the old Truline trains, which is now the Atlas version, and you have the Walters version. Neither one of those cars, and I'm friends with everybody in all those places, so I even hate to say this, but neither one of those cars are any particular car per se. There's some variations in there that
a little more generic.
A couple different manufacturers. The ones that Alec and I are doing for John at Caslow are very specific. We have 2 different length cars. We're changing some of the modifications that they did on the prototypes. These were turned into ingot cars. And as far as we talked about that grain door, we actually had this as a one-piece print. This all printed up together, and we realized we can't paint that. We can't get the masking tape. We can't bend paint. So we made this as a separate piece, so that way we could paint it separately. And
it really snaps on there, though.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I just had to flex it the right way. So.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So now I can actually paint it a little easier. These ends are the same way.
That's approaching it from the modeler standpoint, because
definitely,
if you're not a modeler, you'd say, hey, that's your problem, right?
Yeah. Having to build these ourselves, we quickly realize, hey, we want these, but we go to build them and we can't. That's a problem. So
Alec, how easy was it to change it from all one thing to a separate piece? I mean, was it?
I had drawn it as a separate piece, so it was just mostly some tolerance stuff to make it so you can fit it on there.
Right. You weren't starting from scratch then. You could.
Yes. Yeah. It wasn't starting from scratch. It was just.
So there's another Canadian bulkhead flat. There's Marine Industries. There's CC&F. There's Rail West. Now, they're all had slight differences. It has to do with the stake pockets.
Jack pads. Jack
yeah.
pads are the easiest way to pick. See it.
What was that, Alec?
Oh, sorry.
So the jack pads are
Oh,
the-
jack pads. Gotcha.
Jack pads, the way the ladders are on the end, all of that changed around just a little bit. The
That's
deck
what-
itself changed.
that's
The
when
length changed. Here's a newer
Oh, yeah.
car
Hold
with
it up.
a shortener. Sorry.
So like the True Line Trains, which is now Atlas, and the Walters ones, they're 52-foot 8-inch interior length cars. The new one that we're doing is a 51.6. They haven't been done before. They have different stake pockets. People have been asking for we did a center stake version for the BCs. That's on the longer car, but they've been asking for separate ones to do CNs. But the CN one is actually on the shorter car, not on the one that would be right for the Walters and stuff like that.
Now, is that a more modern car? Is that like a 90s era car?
I'm not
Yeah.
sure when they actually added them. This was the original car, the same as what I showed you before. They've added these stakes. And in
They
this
removed-
case, Rail West did it in the Squamish shops on the BC. So
Yeah, I believe the
Cool
conversion.
car. Now we need loads.
yeah, we're talking about some of that too.
Okay. All right.
Now
Now, all of these cars that you're showing can be seen on your website, correct?
they can, yep. So this same car, they chop
Wheel
them
car.
down, they turn them into wheel cars. And this is a one-piece print.
Yep.
Now, obviously the wheels are not, but we do sell those separately as well.
For a full load, it's like 40 wheels, and they're not fun to paint.
Yeah, yeah, that's the downside of those.
Right.
Well, I showed you this earlier. We do work with Bowser for prototyping. This is their production C415. Now this is a intermediate model. This is not final. So there are some different
Step-
prototype parts, like the steps are different for the SP than what I'm showing here. That's
But what
another
you're
one.
showing is 3D printed.
It is. This is a 3D print, including the handrails. And it
Oh,
was
come
just
on.
fun to see if I could. This is a one-piece print. So this shows you what can be done. It was a little bit of a challenge to support that, but
Huh.
and we talked about flexibility and stuff like that. I can.
That's really interesting because I would have thought that would have snapped like a twig.
No,
So that's demonstrating just how flexible these 3D printed handrails are.
so
No, but
I
that's
don't
not
know
what
if
the
we would do
Bowser
that
is
in
going to
production.
use, right?
No,
No,
that's
no.
what we're gonna use.
I printed that just so that we could take it to a show and say, hey, yep, Bowser is doing the 415. Here it is. So,
Yep.
Long
Long-awaited.
just to throw out some recognition here, one of the more recent Bowser products that have come out that everybody seems to really like are the RS3s. That was also Alec's baby. He did a lot of the drawing on that.
Interesting.
The phase 3s were not me, and they're the ones that have been out. But the Canadians, the RS3 chop noses, the DNHs, the hammerheads, and the new phase 1s will all be my stuff. So
Nice. And that stuff is imminent, I think, from Bowser, right? Like early 2024, I thought I heard.
some of that
It's
stuff.
coming.
From
Yeah.
the sounds of it, it's going to be the Canadian RS3s, then the DNHs. The hammerheads are in there somewhere. I'm not sure where. And then he just announced phase 1s.
Yep.
Which is a DNH model, or I just had to order a bunch of them. So
This is a Western Maryland icebreaker car.
Yep.
I should probably show the side that I didn't drop on the floor. There was a chunk out of this. But kind of a neat and unique car. All one-piece print, so there's no finicky assembly and something like that. We talked.
Miller's car.
Say that again, Alex. Sorry, I talked
Jason
over.
Miller's car.
Yeah, Jason Miller's from 3D production or 3D Scale Productions, Scale 3D Productions. I always screw that up. Sorry. This is another one of his. This is a Redding SD45 cab. He's done a couple different versions of this depending on how you want to model it. This is made to just simply replace the Kato cab. So
Right.
it sits on top of the nose. The prototype locomotive, that the outcropping like that in the front of the cab goes all the way down. It's smooth or flush from the top to the bottom. So you'd have to cut back the nose, which is a little more challenging, but we've done that as well, or Jason's done that as well. You use the Kato glass, it just snaps and it replaces the glass. I'm actually printing right now some headlight and number board pieces out of clear resin. So we are going to try to do some window stuff out of clear resin. There are some techniques that you can use to get it pretty good. It's not acetate by any means, but it's a pretty good representation. It's not bad. So we're going to try it, see how we can go with it. We'll keep working to get better with it.
So here's an idea for you. Now, I was speaking with Rick of Rick's Products.
Okay.
At one point, they offered telephone poles with clear insulation.
Already doing it.
You're already doing it?
We decided that out in Chicago. That Dan Holbrook, we went to his layout, and he had those exact same telephone poles.
Yep.
Not making them anymore.
No, they haven't been made in a long time.
Green. Yep. So the green, there's resin out there, the right colors. So we're gonna do those, and then you just paint the wood, and you can have the insulators on top.
Wood's the easy part. It's getting a clear insulator, and not having to paint them is nice too.
Yep. So that's already being done. But,
okay.
So it's a good idea. You're not the first to have it. This is another Scale 3D Productions car from Jason Miller. There's two versions of this, some with the tie down, some without. Actually, I got to show you the way that he did the weights on this. This is actually a fairly heavy car. They're just aluminum wheel weights designed just to drop right in.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, they're probably steel.
Because we're working together with all these designers, we all collaborate.
He had been posting pictures of that car for months on his Facebook page, so I get to like follow the progress of the design of it.
Yeah. So we're doing the same thing in Alec's D&H cabooses now. We're using those same design for the wheel weights and everything in there. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
They just sink right in. There's a recess there for it, designed just for that. Here's a couple of the new Hawker Siddeley cars from Caslow. Now, these are very early ones, so you definitely do still see some lines.
I see the angled lines. Yep.
Yep. So I wanted to show that a little bit to say that, we know that is happening and we're working on that.
I think it's easier to see on a painted model than the.
It is a little bit. Now, the lines are there here too. It depends on the sheen. I'm still doing the decals on this, so once I dull coat that, those.
Oh, right, the gloss shows it more. Yeah.
Well, there's the one that's been done, and the lines aren't really there.
I don't really see anything there. Yeah.
Yep. So,
flat is your friend.
It is, and then you add a little bit of weathering, and some of that'll go away. But the bigger point is that we're going to do our very best to not have them to begin with. So, we'd rather not have that stuff. This is another Caslow car. I just happen to have a lot of them in the works right now from orders, but this is a Hawker Siddeley 66-foot 6-inch car. Really, really nicely done. I want to say, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is Matt LaChance did the drawing on this. And it's very well done. In fact, one of the things that I really think is cool, it's hard to see. Maybe if I stand up, you can see it over my black shirt, but this is a one-piece brake rigging that is printed all at one time. It's a little bit finicky for me to get it off, but off the supports and everything. But
so how fragile is that? Because the styrene stuff like that, unbelievable. So this is Matt's flexing it back and forth, and it's just floppy.
Now, what I have learned to do in a piece like this, I will barely cure this at all, because that way it'll stay flexible during assembly. Now, as you're working at it, as you're assembling it, you glue it in place, it's gonna solidify just because there's UV light around you. So
normal CA assembly, basically.
Yep, CA. Actually, what I like to use, and Alec was the one that first got me onto it. We use a product called, well, there's a lot of different names for it. One's called Bondic, but it's probably more commonly known as 5-second fix. And all it is resin, and you cure it with a UV flashlight or a little UV light. So it sets up within seconds, and it's the same process essentially as the resin printing, just on a little different scale.
Interesting. It's like one thing after that.
Yep, you can actually use the resin that we're printing, and I've done that. If I have something like a stirrup that just barely breaks, I'll just put a little resin on the backside. I'll cure it, and it solves the problem because it cures itself together again.
That's amazing. I'm interested, I think, in seeing your shop, because we have been
talking about where we're at here.
the shop tour here. So for our listeners, we're going to be doing some
All right.
video related, so that
There's one more neat
truck
thing.
frames.
Yeah.
We're going to be switching over to Matt's cell phone. He's going to walk around and give a tour of the shop. So this might be a little less scintillating for the audio people, but Matt will try to be very descriptive, right, Matt?
I will do my best, yes.
Okay. And we'll try to make sure that the technical aspect of switching over from one Zoom call to another at Matt's goes as smoothly as possible. So I'm basically talking through the dead air of that process. Alec, feel free to jump in, help me out here.
Well, while we're waiting for Matt, I don't have a good camera, but that's the truck I drew. It's a Commonwealth tender truck.
Ah, and when you put wheel sets in that, how much flex is in that? You have to snap them in, right? So
they go in. I haven't broken one yet. At least not on accident. I have broken a few on purpose just to see how bad they were.
right. Stress
but
testing.
I will say it does roll extremely well.
So
Mike, you gotta let me in there.
That tells me that you've got the dimensions right.
Yes, and I scaled it for tangent axles.
Yep.
Mike, you gotta accept me in when you get a
Okay,
moment.
we're going to accept your cell phone into the call. And I just did, and there it is.
Right.
So now you're going to mute your computer and turn the audio on your cell phone, I think. At least this worked well in rehearsal. That's right, folks. We did a rehearsal of this because this is not something we've done on the podcast before.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. And now
All
we've got
right.
the phone, right?
Are we getting any echo?
We do have the echo. Maybe you have to mute your computer.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay.
It's
Let me
very
turn my
ambitious.
camera around because nobody wants to look at me.
Right. We don't need a Matt Herman selfie. We need the shot.
There we go.
Okay.
All right.
So this is 3D Central World Headquarters.
Yep. So I'll just give you an overall view of the room. It's not huge, but this is about 2/3 of my two-car garage that I've custom rebuilt into, printing station or a print house.
It's very neat, Matt. Is that because of the podcast or is it always like this?
Well, I will say that I am working very hard to try to keep it organized. I just have too much going on that it's easy to create the mess, but I am really trying to not do that because it's just hard to navigate. The room's not huge. So one thing I'm a little proud of, to be honest, the garage door still works. This is a
I saw the opener up there before. Yes.
Now everything's closed, but you can see it's still here. And what I've done is taken some just neoprene, basically just a rubberized, sheet, and rolled it across. The garage door can come open and close, but that just helps keep the air out. Again, we want to keep this all.
It's like a big weather strip.
On temperature. Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to start at the beginning because this shop was built with production in mind. So obviously we have our printers. These are our IKEA cabinets that we have customized and turned into 3D printing cabinets. So you know what? As we were talking, this one finished, we talked about the headlight assemblies and number boards on those Reading cabs. That just finished. It must have. It was not a long print to begin with. It looks like it was 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I was hoping to have you guys
like the microwave when it's done.
It does. Yep, just one quick beep usually, but I don't have a whole lot going on at the moment today. I was doing a lot of other stuff, so I didn't get any new prints started at the moment. But these finished up just a little while ago too, just before the podcast. These are the Reading cabs from Scale 3D Productions. If you look, if I can get the light to hit it just right, there you can kind of see it. There's a distortion there.
Right below the window.
Yep, and that's probably because of that rib that's in the middle, the support rib, to keep it from, bowing out or anything like that. But right there, you can see that really well. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get rid of that. Obviously, that's, to me, again, you have to get it in just the right light, but it's just not good enough. I'm trying to keep my standards higher than that. I don't want to put something like that out if I can help it.
So I readjusted a little bit on the print. These were just sitting, just rocked back and forth, just straight like that. And it just, as you saw, it has that distortion. So now I took and I rotated it a little bit in two different directions. And by doing that, that line, it's hard to see in the camera with the light that's in there, but I've examined them pretty good already, and they're not there. So just by turning that, the build forces off of the plate or off of the FEP have changed, and now we don't have that issue anymore. So
That gives me another idea. Now, Alec, you know how an exterior post boxcar, it has like that little wavy effect on the panels between the posts. Is that something that you guys could design in and print that way? That would be
the
very.
they call it the oil can effect. Yeah.
It is something that could be done. Yep.
Hmm.
We've discussed that, but Alec doesn't like the idea because it's a lot of work.
It sounds like it would be a lot of complex curves, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah. There are some tools that are in Fusion 360 that can help with that, though. Actually, Lee is using it to make cold loads and FDM printing, and we could use some of the same processes, I think. We just have to experiment a little and get good at it. So these
So this looks like a different printer.
They are. So this, I'll go back to the other just so we can recognize the difference again. But so these are Saturn IIs. This is what they call an 8K machine, bulletproof. These machines just run well. I get really, really good results with them. I like them. I've actually got another one coming because I just like how these print. I get really good results with them. This is the newer machine, and they're a little cheaper than the new machine. This is a 12K machine. This is a Saturn III Ultra. I got a pair of them. I'm starting to get better results with them, but it was a lot of trial and error at first. So I don't dislike these machines. I just had to tweak them. They were new, so I had to learn them a little bit. So these a little bit finer resolution. They're faster. They're a lot faster, which in production is important. So
Sure.
as I get better and better with these, I'm sure I will find that I'll end up with more of these as well. I'm already foreseeing that I will have double the amount of printers early next year. We just have too much going on not to do that.
Now, do you have enough space for that, Matt?
Yes, I designed this so that we can move these panels up and I can put another one in right below on these shelves. So
Okay.
I'm not deliberately not using these shelves for anything really useful because I know I'm going to empty them and move things
Gotcha.
around. These are Elegoo Jupiter machines. So these are our big machines. Unfortunately, I don't really have anything in there at the moment. I guess I could use one of these Roger Williams cars. You can see just kind of how they fit in there.
Oh, okay. At a 45-degree angle, it accommodates that. How long is that? Is that Roger Williams? Is that
This is about an
80-foot car?
85-foot car. 85, yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
So there's some more IHP Reading PBT cars, I believe. It's, so yeah, we can fit quite a bit in there. I've done some math, and I know I can get a 40-foot box car in there, or an O-scale 40-foot. I may even get real close to being able to fit a 50-foot in there. I'd probably have to not only go at a 45 this way, but also this way at an angle. So I
Right,
have just a little bit more
three
length.
dimensions, right? Kitty corner.
Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get as many cars in there doing that, but I can do it. And as I said, if you run out of space, then you go and you buy another machine. So that's the third Jupiter now. I've got it here, but I've not yet even turned it on. So this one's brand new to me. So we are eventually going to be also getting into some laser stuff. So we'll do laser cut decks and a couple other things. So that's where this space is designated for.
Wow.
Well, I'm waiting on the enclosure to show up. I've had the laser actually for a couple of months now, but my
Right,
focus
you have to
hasn't been
exhaust
getting
the
that
smoke
going.
on that, right?
Yeah, so that'll all have to go outside here. Now, this exhaust, this is just a squirrel cage, basically. This is all internal, and it actually works really well. It kind of came with the printer. I did buy this one secondhand, and he sent this along. It's actually very quiet and it works really, really well. So I'm impressed by that. But
Does that exhaust to
curious
the
to see.
outside or just?
It does not. I don't know what kind of filters on that thing, but it just exhausts inside even, and it works quite well. So on top, I didn't show you this before. Hopefully the camera angle changed there. So this all vents everything I have out to the outside. So
I see.
that goes all the way through. It's just simply put in place. So one of these vents goes out of every box. So it tends to work very well. We live out in the middle of nowhere. So having a battery backup, I don't care where you live, having a battery backup for a 3D printer is a good idea.
It's funny you say that, because when you were talking about how long it takes to print, that was on my list of questions that I probably would have forgotten to ask. So it's good to see that.
So a lot of these machines, you have to take the covers on and off. That's one of the advantages of having its own enclosure.
Right.
We don't have to do that all the time. So this is one of the purposes for building them the way that I did. It also keeps the heat in. So as you can see, each one of these double boxes has a temperature module in it, so I can see what the temperature is at all times.
Mhm.
I have a little hard to see because I got stuff in the way, but just a computer fan that cycles all of the air around, circulates everything, and then just an open vent here so everything can move around. And then on the opposite side, I have a heater. So it heats on one side, the temperature probe is on the other. So that way it keeps the entire thing as an even temperature, and it tends to work very well. I am looking at some other ways to heat the resin itself. There's something called a vat band that keeps your vat of liquid at one temperature. It just basically is a heat tape that goes around the outside. And I've heard really, really good things from it. So I'm going to try a couple of those out.
Mm-hmm.
How
noisy are the printers? Like if they were all going, would it be?
I hardly hear them. No, they're actually fairly quiet. I mean, they have a sound, but you really don't hear much of it. It's
a very slight motor hum, and it's just something that goes in the background. You don't even realize it.
Wow.
I also have an FDM printer, which is that kind that lays the filament that we were talking about earlier. That's a bit noisier.
Right. Right.
So much faster and more constantly, and it's doing little adjustments. So sometimes it almost sounds like it's making music.
Yeah, it's very tonal. Yeah.
Bits and different rhythms. That's a lot noisier, but the resin printers are pretty quiet.
Mm-hmm. Now,
so
is that a fume hood above there that
I'm
looking at?
That's just a kitchen range hood, like it made for an island. So as I said earlier, the resin itself doesn't really bother me too much, and I do have that all vented anyhow. But the alcohol bath, this is just normal IPA, and that stinks.
Oh yeah.
So I want to vent that outside, so we put this range hood right over where we're doing all of the alcohol washing. I can still smell it when I use it, but there's 3 different adjustments on the fan, and I'm constantly turning them up and down depending on what I'm doing. They're a little noisy, so if I want to, if I turn them on, then you're going to hear that.
Right.
But it's not terrible. It's just enough somebody's trying to talk to me or something. So a little more challenging if that's on.
Yep.
So, just silicone mats, the rest of it. Some of the tools we use to take the supports off. This is
like regular modeling tools.
Yeah, essentially. This is the Bondic. It's just, it's just a liquid, clear, thick liquid resin. And then I just hit it with a UV light, which, I'm not going to shine at my eyes, but it just almost instantly hardens. It's really nice stuff. The nice thing is the resin itself out of this Bondic, it'll stay liquid for a long time. It just doesn't set up unless it's getting hit by that UV light.
So you've got wiggle time.
Yeah, you definitely do.
I like that idea. It's I'm gonna check that out, because I could think of a lot of applications where that would really be helpful.
Yeah, we use it all the time at ESU because we could use it to hold wires in place as we were putting decoders in.
You're reading my mind.
The most. I have to wait for glue to dry. I also use it for lenses once in a while. It dries pretty clear.
Oh, it dries clear?
Like light lenses and stuff like that. Yeah.
That beats waiting for canopy glue to become
Yes.
non-translucent.
Exactly.
Huh.
There's one of the chisels that Hunter Houston, Jerry gave me the idea to get. So
I've
it
been
works very,
buying
very
that
well.
part off of Amazon. I actually have a couple of them. They're really sharp and really easy to use. I think it's a great tool.
These are hard to come by because they're having a little trouble getting a hold of them. This is a PBL sprue cutter.
Oh, that
I
goes way back.
These are some of the best sprue cutters I've ever used. I'm actually I talk to Jimmy Booth from PBL all the time, and I'm trying to get him to send me some every chance I get. I just love these things. But yeah, overall, it's just normal modeling tools, nothing real special. Every 3D print shop has USB sticks. That's how you transfer the data back and forth. The new Saturn 3s are supposed to be Wi-Fi. A lot of people aren't having good results with that. The Jupiters do have an Ethernet cable. I could use that. I'm back and forth. My office is down in my basement in the layout room. So it keeps me good and exercised up and down the steps 35 times a day.
I'll bet. So in other words, I expected to see computers all over the place, but basically you're just plugging in a USB stick with the file and you do everything at the printer?
I do. Yep. I'm not going to turn everything on, but basically, that's actually something else that's kind of a neat part of what we did. Alec FDM printed these boxes, and it's just a USB port. And if I pull that out of there, you can see.
Yeah.
So it's basically nothing more than an extension cable,
Right.
because the USB in the side of the machine is kind of back in the back, and it's a little
Right. Not
difficult to get
convenient.
to. So we just put them all. We made these little holders, and we just put them all up front, and they're awesome. They're so much easier. Works really, really well.
The ability to just make whatever you can conceive of must be a very powerful thing.
It definitely is. So, again, we will have to wash everything. So having wash stations, and I'm sure anybody who does 3D printing is watching this is seeing how dirty my dirty wash is right now. It needs to be cleaned out. It's
That's
due.
why they call it a dirty wash.
That's right. That's right. And that one's not as important because you are going to wash anything that's left over out into the clean wash. So
I see several bins there. So is it 3 washes that you do?
I've got no, basically I just, with the Jupiter, the newest Jupiter, I got another wash station that was kind of came with it. I had already bought another one just so I had a spare in case anything happened. So when I got this one, I thought, you know what, I'm going to get the other new one out, and at the same time I now have 2 dirty washes, 2 clean washes. I can just be a little more efficient in my production.
Yeah.
So we continue to pick up more business, and I want to be able to keep up. So after you get them out of the wash, it's alcohol. It dries very quickly, really. But as you're doing a bunch of stuff, especially if I have 2 wash stations going, I got just a shoe rack, and I put a box fan on the back side of it. And this works very well just to dry everything. Because before you go to the next step and cure it all, you have to have everything completely dry. If it's still wet, you're gonna notice it in the cure. It's gonna be shiny. It's not gonna have the same finish.
So it's print, wash, dry, cure.
That's correct. Yep. So these are 3 of the curing stations. This one, this Anycubic washing cure, this is actually a curing station and a wash station. I will probably only use it for a wash station. So there's a hood. That's the yellow one here. It can go over top of that. Those they're just UV lights. They'll light up, and there's a Lazy Susan that just goes around when that's curing as well. Same as concept as I have in here.
So
Here's
the
stuff
yellow
that's
screens
in
out the
one of them.
UV and protect your eyes. Is that the idea?
Correct. Yep. So I'll just turn that on just so it's doing something. But
Okay.
a little
So it's a
turntable
little
just goes
turntable,
around,
and
light comes on, away we go. So I actually don't want to cure those too much. Those are very small parts. And as we talked earlier, things do get brittle. So if I cure it too long and people try to take those small parts off, they'll just snap and break. So for the small part sprues, I always try to leave them with just a small cure on them so they're still pretty flexible, so you don't have to worry about them breaking.
sounds like there's a lot of trial and error on this.
There definitely is. Yeah.
And when
A
it
lot of-
takes so long to
you learn
print, that
every
must be
day.
a little demoralizing, right?
Yeah, when you have a 38-hour print and the last 10 minutes you get an error because of the computer software sends a slicing error, they call it. So when you're setting all of this up, you have to add these supports. And then actually, speaking of slicing error, I see one. You have to add all these supports individual, and then you have to slice it. The software is called a slicing program. Basically, what you're doing is you're cutting it into each of those layers that those pixels will light up on.
Mhm.
And it tells the pixels to light up on those layers. And once in a great while, you'll get this error that will go all the way through the entire build plate. And it's
Mhm.
just a splicing error. It's just a computer fault. Actually, I think part of it even happens with cheap data sticks, which I've gotten rid of now because I
Mhm.
have had a couple problems. So you get all of that's printed, and then you get to the very bottom. Well, this is the other way around, but usually it's about right here. But you'll sit there for 17 hours and print this, and then you'll have an error that you can't use the print.
So
that
that's
gets a
so
little
that stack,
demoralizing.
that whole stack has the same error, and they're all useless.
In this case, I did lock out. I can see that it only goes through the first two cars. You can see it in that car. It's gone by the time you get to the third car. And that's, again, I see some just weird things. So yes, once you have everything finalized, you should be able to use that same file and start over again. And then that happens. So theoretically, it all goes out the window once in a while.
So when that happens, do you just write a new file to a new stick or something?
Yeah, usually what I'll do is I'll go downstairs. If I see that happen, I'll go downstairs and reslice it and then write that to the stick and bring it back up. And almost always it goes away when I do stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it doesn't happen all the time. And if I'm finding it's more and more rare, probably because I've updated all of my data sticks. But
Right.
there's a lot of little things that can happen. So that's sort of it. Here's you talked about the C415 and all of the handrails on it.
Jeez.
That's how that one was a mess. I actually want to try this again. I printed two of these at once, so this is exactly the same as the other print, but this is the support structure that
That
has
looks
to
like it
hold
would be
all
an
in.
all-day job to get rid of the support structure.
It took me a little while on this one. It wasn't as bad as you think, but it did take me a little bit. And I screwed up because I can't see where all those supports are. I ended up going through the deck on one of them. I didn't realize it till it was too late, but it happens. So this wasn't for anything important. It was just a display at a quick show. So no big deal.
I look at the scope of the effort involved in all of this and all of the things that you guys are juggling, and I think, when do you sleep?
From midnight till 6 a.m.
Wow. You're really hitting it hard, aren't you?
I am, but again, that's the passion. And I did the same thing at ESU, especially early on until things were moving. And that's how you build it. I don't, even now, it is a job, but I don't ever feel like I have one. When you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And
Right.
I've tried to live my life that way. I've tried to find ways to incorporate my passion into being able to pay the bills. And I've been very fortunate in being able to do that.
It beats working.
It definitely does. So there's one of the side sliders. This is, anytime you see pictures on my Facebook page, this is where it's taken. So,
Oh, okay. So that's just a light box for taking pictures. I got
that's all. That's it. So Lee Bowser, and if you haven't realized, they've just recently closed the store at English's. So he's selling some components out of the store that they just don't need anymore. And these old cabinets are perfect for keeping my etchings in. So
that must have been a gold mine for you.
Yeah, for sure. And actually the baker's rack that's on the end there, that also came from there. So
right, but multi-drawer metal cabinets like that, I mean, they just don't make stuff like that anymore.
Nope, and they're solid. And I don't know how it worked out that they absolutely just barely fit under that table, but they do. So,
you're living right.
Well, I'll tell you how I got them there. A good 3-pound hammer.
Oh, jeez. So they're not coming out anytime soon.
No, they're not coming out there. You can see a little bit of dent in the corner.
Wow.
So etchings, decals, small parts, I print off a bunch of cabs. You really don't want, I got a lot of stuff sitting around right now, but you really don't want a lot of stuff sitting in the light. It is a curing situation where, you don't want any UV light getting to the stuff if you can help it. Normally this table is clear. This is where I'll do all of my packaging. And then, if I have this cleared up, I'll also do some shipping and boxing for the shipping here as well. When I don't have a whole bunch of stuff on this table, this is, there's a postal scale, computer, shipping, printer, all that kind of stuff. So I am set up for production and shipping. The workflow works very, very well. I start printing, I wash, I bring it over to the rack. The rack brings over to the, I'm probably getting everybody sick. The rack comes over to the shipping table or boxing table and shipping, and then it's out the door. The main reason I did this was because this is the front of the garage. This is where UPS and postal service will come. There is a door in the back, but I don't want to have to go around the garage every time I ship and receive. So I did this so they can just back right up to the door and I can go right out. In the wintertime or even in the summer, when I open that, it still stays temperature controlled without having to have a great big door opening for the garage door and losing all of my heat or all of my air conditioning. So
it looks like a very logical
well.
and efficient layout. And I'm just wondering how it would work if there were more than one person in there doing that stuff.
Two of us is about the max. I mean, you can fit 3 in here and doing stuff. You can have one person on one side, another person over there, another person cleaning over here.
Right.
So you could, and theoretically, you could get up to 3 without too much trouble. You just probably should like each other. So I walked over here. This is the next step at 3D Central, probably mid 2024, maybe later 2024. At another show sometime, I'll show you my layout. It is a 26 by 52 foot layout with a lot of backdrops, 3 levels. So I found that working with Conflone and all of you guys, making backdrops commercially is expensive. And till I did the math on this, I thought, I'm just going to buy myself a printer and print my own backdrops. So this is a commercial printer. It prints 44 inches wide by up to 100 feet long rolls of paper. And it's about $1,000 just to replace all the ink in it. But the ink all goes in here. They're great big ink cartridges, but it's made for commercial use. So my thinking is, since I've got to learn it for myself in order to help pay for the printer, I might as well learn how to do it so that I can use it commercially and be able to make 3D backdrop 3D backdrops. That'd be neat. That's the next step, I guess. Printed photo backdrops. And I've just learned that Photoshop has AI built into it now, so it'll take a bunch of photos, put them all together for you, so it makes the photo editing side of it much easier now. So that's where we're at.
That I have to say that has exceeded my my expectations. So nice job there. I mean, we're probably pushing the limits of our podcast length at this point, but I could see where we need to keep an eye on you because there's always going to be continuing developments, aren't there? You're still muted, by the way. There you go.
All right. So hopefully you can hear me back, and
you're fine.
I can hear you, so we're in good shape.
Very impressive. Alec, do you have any final thoughts on all of this? Like what?
Not really.
What's do you have something that you're looking forward to, approaching next, or is it just mow them down one after another?
One after another. Between drawing for Leah Bowser, Caslow, Matt, and myself, it's just if anybody can come up with a time machine or a way for me to do twice the amount of work at once without some kind of illegal drug, I appreciate finding out what it is.
It's all personal productivity. We have tiny parts Matt is showing here. What do we have here?
These are more of Alec's designs, the Bridgeline design parts. Alec, as you've seen, is a D&H modeler. So these are for converting D&H U23Bs to a earlier phase where they
it's
had
the flare
coupling between the radiator and the car body.
Where has this been all my life? I've tried doing a few of those, and it's not my favorite thing to do.
And there's well, nose headlights. We've done some, well, he's done, all I've done is print them. There's some just blanks, some plates, same thing though, nose light. I can't get that to focus.
So is everything that we're talking about here on your website?
Yes and no. I think all of these small parts are now. There's a few new parts that aren't quite there yet, but are getting close. So
Mhm.
a couple new cars that'll be coming up. Jason's as I was getting on my phone, I saw there were some notifications on Facebook that Jason Miller from Scale 3D Productions has announced his forklift. So I probably can't easily share that. Sorry about that. But
Glad I inspired somebody on the other side of the earth here.
That's right. As I say that, here's another one of his cars. This is an a Reading XLL.
That's very cool.
60-foot car.
Door and a half.
That's right. That's right.
And those made it into Conrail too. So, you know, that's I could see what I'm going to be doing later. Well, guys, thanks for being on the show. I mean, that was way interesting, I have to say. I hope everybody else found it as interesting as I did. I'll probably think of a dozen more questions after we're all done, but I know how to get a hold of you.
Good. Good.
All right, folks. Well, thus concludes another crew call. Hopefully, we'll have a shorter interval between this one and the next one. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Mhm.